Hey everybody, welcome to the Salt Lake Business Podcast. I'm here with Dr. Julie Eggington with her company CGI, which is a nonprofit. So why don't you give the people kind of a background of where you came from and then how you came to be working and founding CGI right now.
Sure. So I have a PhD in biochemistry. I'm a Badger. I got my degree at University of Wisconsin-Madison.
Go Badgers.
Yep. And so I got my degree in 2006. I moved back here. I actually kind of started in the United States in this area, and I moved back here to do a postdoctoral fellowship up at the University of Utah. And I was in Professor Brenda Bass's lab in biochemistry. I was having a fantastic experience there, but then I decided that I didn't want to be an academic. I wanted to go into industry. And so I ended up getting a job, a very, very fortuitous job at Myriad Genetics. So Myriad Genetics is a genetic testing company here in Salt Lake City that focuses, at the time focused on hereditary cancers, has since expanded its product offerings, what it does. But I was very lucky in that I got a job right when Myriad Genetics recognized that what they actually had was big data on a lot of the genetic tests that they were running. And they wanted somebody to come in and just kind of explore what it meant to use that data to find discoveries for the patients that they'd been testing for about 20 years. And so it was a very, very lucky time for somebody to come in and explore that. And so I joined the company and was there for 4.5 years, ended up working with a cross-disciplinary team, built my own team, and we really explored what it's like to statistically validate genetics data to be used in a clinical setting. And so it was a fantastic experience.
So for Myriad data, did you, how much, you said big data, how much data did you guys have at that time?
Yeah, so by the time I left, there were probably about anywhere between 1 million to 2 million, I can't quite recall.
Human samples?
Human samples for BRCA1 and BRCA2. These are the two main hereditary breast and ovarian cancer genes. So, everyone talks about the Angelina Jolie effect. I was at Myriad Genetics when that was happening, when Angelina Jolie went through her experience with BRCA1 and BRCA2 and published, she wrote her own first-person piece that was published, and then very rapidly, many Americans decided this is something I should pursue as well. And there was just a tsunami of engagement with hereditary breast and ovarian cancer testing. And so I got to experience that firsthand, and and volume of this type of testing has just increased ever since. So I was at Myriad Genetics for 4.5 years, was learning a lot from some amazing people. But by the time I left, the systems were very automated in terms of a lot of the grunt work. We would call it AI now, that we had developed some artificial intelligence programs. And my specific team's role was to try to disprove the hypotheses that the AI was coming up with on how to reclassify certain genetic variation. So it was pure science. It felt great to do that. However, I was interested in expanding my experience beyond hereditary cancer. And so I ended up joining a company, leaving Myriad and joining a company that was headquartered back east called Cortigen. It's since gone out of business, but it was focused on pediatric disease. So different neurological diseases, seizure disorders, some cardiac disorders. So I joined them, and it was a startup. I think I may have been their 49th employee or something like that. And
so somewhat mature.
Yeah, it'd been around for a little while. And so I was tasked with working with a team to create a really high throughput variant classification, very accurate variant classification system. We implemented a lot while I was there, but then I got an offer I frankly couldn't refuse, and that was to join the 23andMe team. That there was actually a team out here in Salt Lake City. Few people realize that, but for a time, 23andMe was developing a different product, and it was being developed out here in Salt Lake City. And so,
what was that product?
So their existing product now is similar to what Ancestry DNA does. It focuses on where was your origin. It has some different health components to it that have been approved by the FDA. But we were developing a product with what we call next-gen sequencing. And just because of privacy reasons, I can't divulge everything that we were doing, but it was based upon next-gen sequencing technology. So it was whole gene sequencing as opposed to certain marker sequencing, which is what 23andMe's bread and butter has been. And so the core team was out here. We were in development for about a year before the CEO of 23andMe turns out to have had very clear vision. And she felt that consumers were not ready for this type of product. And so they pivoted away from that. And that would have been in 2016, the Salt Lake team was let go.
In 2016 is when I did my DNA sample of 23andMe.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay. So turns out she was actually very smart to see that. The companies that have pressed forward, this has made the news in the last 6 weeks, the companies that have pressed forward on that type of technology just haven't recognized the market that they had wanted to. And so she was frankly just smart to have made that decision business-wise. But me and another guy at 23andMe, we wanted to do something different. And so one advantage in biotech to when you are let go is that they let you go with a severance package. And so that allows you to get more creative and perhaps a little bit more brave than you otherwise would have been.
Freedom for what, 6 months, 12 months?
I can't divulge what the package was.
What's the timeline where you're like, I'm pretty good?
Yeah, it was enough that we decided to do something a little bit creative.
Right.
And so we created, it was a consulting company. And it was initially called Center for Genomic Interpretation. It got renamed to GeneInt when we created the nonprofit Center for Genomic Interpretation. But so we created a consulting company in which we began to consult with the nation's larger size diagnostic genetic testing laboratories, as well as some of the emerging direct-to-consumer companies. And we were solely focused initially on helping those companies improve the interpretation of sequence variation. So these are the mutations that you find when you sequence the AGTC letter code of genes, and you need to figure out, do they or do they not add risk to you for certain types of disease? And that's what we were expert at. And so we started consulting with these diagnostic laboratories and some direct consumer laboratories. We had a lot of really great experiences. We had a lot of shocking experiences. What ultimately led to the foundation, the formation of our 501c3 nonprofit organization, which was we took the name Center for Genomic Interpretation when we renamed the for-profit consulting company. And incidentally, the for-profit consulting company, we actually closed down once we got too busy in the nonprofit. But the reason why we created that nonprofit is that we recognized that there was so much commercial and investor pressure on the genetics industry that one of the first things to go out the window was quality, and that relates to accuracy.
Because they want speed?
Yeah, investors demand a certain rate of return. This is an industry that frankly takes years to see that return if you're being slow and careful. And if we wanted to find a way to help the industry and to help these commercial companies that have investors, if we want to help them be profitable, but improve their accuracy, then we had to kind of step outside of the drivers that was causing the accuracy and the quality to go low in the industry. And so that's what we did. We reorganized into a 501c3 nonprofit in order to just take away the different pressures that they were experiencing. Now, this happened almost exactly 3 years ago. And we mistakenly thought that because, there were so many people that said, do this, we will love it, we'll support you, we will help you. And we thought that we would have access to a lot of donation money from foundations when that happened. Turns out that was not the case. So like many, entrepreneurs, when they try something new and they think they know what the industry needs and what product the industry needs, you're wrong. You're basically wrong. And as long, like many entrepreneurs, as long as they're willing to be nimble and look around, and I say an entrepreneur, even though we reorganized into a nonprofit, we still follow basic business principles, right?
You got to keep the lights on.
You got to keep the lights on, got to be nimble. And, so we took contracts here or there as long as the as long as the work we were doing was to help a company somewhere deliver a higher quality genetics product, then that fit our mission. As long as they were dedicated to making quality improvement. So we were taking these contracts here and there, and then we had a fortuitous event happening. We'd gone to a summit in Nashville that was bringing together health insurance companies with the genetics diagnostic laboratories from this nation. And this was about 2.5 years ago. And what it was a 2-day working sessions where they were basically exploring. It was hosted by a company called Concert Genetics. And we were exploring with the health insurance companies and the diagnostic laboratories what's wrong with precision medicine right now. Why is there so much friction for insurance companies to pay? Why is it so difficult for precision medicine genetics companies to reach a point of profitability? And so it was a 2-day working sessions about that. And what was interesting is a white paper was published out of those 2-day working sessions, and there were, everyone was split into groups, and we were tasked with different things, and four items came out of that at that 2-day summit. It was the first of its kind, and 2 of them revolved around there needs to be a third-party, independent, nonprofit organization that can help define quality and measure quality in the industry, because what we recognize is that the reason why the commercial payers, when I say payer, I mean the health insurance companies, were not willing to unlock the payment was because they were unsure of quality, and there was no way to assess what quality is or was in this industry. They don't know if what they're paying for is snake oil or not. Mm-hmm. And so there was a call for a nonprofit organization to step up to the plate and say, okay, we can help add that transparency. And then a call for a nonprofit to really act as kind of a broker between the labs and between the insurance companies and fill this space. And there were about 3 nonprofits that were there. We were one of them. The other 2 nonprofits focus on rare disease advocacy. And so we were the right ones to put up our hands and say, we can do that, right? We're looking for a way to accomplish our quality driving mission. Let that be us. And
at this time, sorry to interrupt, at this time, how many employees did you guys have?
Oh, we only had 4.
Oh, you only had 4?
Yeah.
So you were super...
We were very, very, very small.
Very small.
And in fact, we've remained small, and we have found a way to, part of being a startup is your volume of work goes up and down, right? And without seed funding, without venture capital funding, where you can bring in a team of 10 or 20 or 30 and assure them a salary
money
for 12 months, we have had to do something a little bit more creative because nobody gave us seed funding, right? So we've had to bootstrap our way, and so we've done that. We've successfully managed to do that by using contractors. So one thing that we're very lucky about is that there's a lot of frustrated scientists in the industry who, every scientist wants to do the right thing. Every clinician hired in this industry wants to do the absolute best for the patient. But many of them end up in companies where that's just not possible, mm-hmm. right? By these investor demands. And so what often happens is they either get fed up and quit. They either make so much noise in the company they're in that they get fired. And then when they get released, they've heard about us, they know we exist, they pick up the phone and they call us and they say, I'm a free agent for a number of months. Can I do work for you? And we've never, ever not had the ability to fill a contract based upon these people that are, top of their game. We have people that sometimes retire. They've been in it for 30 years. They retire, they reach out, and they actually often volunteer their time to do these very high-end technical work.
So how do you get it sounds like you did a great job getting your name out if people are actually reaching out to you. How do people know about you? Was that intentional on your part, or some more of just reputation on your work?
At first it was reputation for the commercial companies that we had worked for. It was, for example, when this was part of the reason why we felt we could initially start the consulting company. when we were let go from 23andMe, when the news spread that the Salt Lake team had been let go. And what the Salt Lake team was actually kind of a dream team in genetics, right? So at the time that the woman at 23andMe, Jill Hagencord, was putting together this team, 23andMe had the clout and the money to basically reach out to, like, if you could put together the dream team to create this type of product, who would it be? And so she was able to kind of collect those people. And so when word got out that those people were free agents, a lot of work came our way, which just phone calls, unsolicited phone calls. And so that's what initially gave us the idea and the belief that we could go out on our own.
So there's not a lot of people like you?
No.
It's a very specialized.
It's very specialized.
How many people
niche.
you think, I guess maybe is it in the country or in the world? Is it more a global thing or more?
Yeah, in the world. So in the last 3 years, I've become much more broad in my skill set. But at the time, 3 years ago, in the world, there was probably about 20 people that could do what I could do, and I was the only free agent. So
good for you.
Yeah, everyone else. So it was a very unique position to be in. So it may be fewer than 20 actually. Anyway, so what happened was we put up our hands, said, let that be us. Let us be the nonprofit. It matches our mission. We didn't quite know how to do this at scale, so let that be us. And so Blue Shield of California, which has over 4 million members, took us up on the offer. And they said, we want to do this. We want to really engage and really disrupt the industry and figure out how to assure that our plan members in Blue Shield of California.
So the insurance company?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Health insurance companies, we want to make sure that they get, quality genetic testing, and there are hundreds, over 300 genetic testing companies that we engage with. Which ones are offering genetic testing products that are actually legit and help patients as opposed to do nothing or potentially harm patients. So we began engaging and working with them to explore what it is that they and the entire industry needs. Out of that emerged what we call our Elevate Genetics Initiative. This is an initiative for all stakeholders in the industry. It's not owned by Blue, there's no exclusive partnership with Blue Shield California, although it did emerge out of many, many, many discussions with them. And thanks to two major champions, Henry Garlish at Blue Shield of California, and then a genetic counselor who was there, Stephanie Gandomi, who was at Blue Shield of California and is now at United Healthcare. They were really champions and visionaries in this space, and gave us a lot of their time to explore what it was that the industry needed. And so Elevate Genetics stands for engaging laboratories, encouraging validity, assessing test efficacy. It stands for Elevate. And then we put genetics on the back of that. And so it has really, we've been developing over the last 2 years this, and it's about to full scale launch. And there's a number of payers that we're in negotiations with on exactly how to, some regional, some national. We've also started engaging with employer groups. So this is something we learned along the way. As it turns out, I'm gonna speak to the camera here.
Go for it.
What I thought, and what probably most Americans think, is that their health insurance company and the decision makers about their health are actually being made by the health insurance company. It is partly true, but 65% of the members that are administered by the big health insurance companies, the plans are actually directly paid by employer groups, right? So these are your large employer groups. Just think of all the large companies. The way it effectively works is that there is, a bank account, that the employer groups pays into. So, pays into, and one of these, insurance companies, whether it be any of the Blues or any of the Uniteds or any of the regional insurance companies, manage and administer those plans. And the insurance company, receives payment for the administration of that plan. But in terms of actually how efficiently that money is being used, it is the employer that cares very much about, are their members, and because think about it, an employer wants to make sure more than anybody else that their employees and their employees' families are in tip-top shape. They're healthy, they remain healthy, they're not losing days of work to being sick. They want to make sure that their family members are healthy and well, because when my kid gets sick, I can't work.
Yeah, you take off
right?
work. Yeah, it's stressful in the home.
Yeah, so it's actually your employer that really, really, really cares about keeping you healthy. Not only for days missed of work, but also the expense of it. And so it turns out that if you're involved in healthcare and you feel that you have a message that says, I can keep your people healthy and well and active, the most powerful groups are actually the employers, the big employment companies to talk to. So it took us a while to figure that out. It's a good
discovery, though. Now you know your customer.
Really fantastic. So we continue to work with the health insurance companies, but we've just begun to engage the employer groups as well. And and the messaging in precision medicine is this: if your employee or your plan member, if you're the insurer, gets a genetic test that gives them a false positive result, which is a lot of genetic tests will do that, they're now on a pathway to having to have surgeries or medications, none of which they probably need. Or it can give you a false negative result, meaning that
telling you you're okay, but you're really not.
When you're not, right? And if they had been, a higher quality genetic test, then they could have caught something and entirely, in some diseases, entirely prevented it, right? And this is what we see with the Angelina Jolie effect. She had not yet had breast cancer or ovarian cancer, but she identified that she had a mutation in a gene, a pathogenic mutation in a gene that would put her at high risk. So she said, I'm not going to die that way, right? And so she removed, she had the surgeons remove her breasts and her ovaries. There are some diseases that you can entirely prevent or nearly completely prevent in that way. There are some other diseases that if you start taking medication early, you can greatly reduce the risk that you'll ever have either full expression of that disease or any expression of that disease. So we care very much about genetic tests being effective. We want to make sure that they're legit, that what they're testing for is actually relevant to you. We want to make sure that that they use the highest possible processes in the laboratory so that you get a good quality result. So our Elevate Genetics initiative is about whoever really cares, whether it be the payer or the employer group, commissioning a quality, an extensive, very, very in-depth quality audit on the genetic tests that are being put to use on the American public.
Right.
And so we do these, when we're engaged by a payer, a commercial payer, or by an employer to do this, we'll do a comparative analysis. So they'll say, and when I say we will, we've done alpha audit, and we're in process of recruiting the next wave of labs for the beta audits as we're improving our process. So we have a secure digital portal that we do this through, et cetera. And we have a standards committee that we're deploying standards with. So we keep iterating and getting more efficient with what we're exploring.
How do you, sorry to interrupt again. So how do you just find out a better way to just find out what the customer wants? How are you constantly testing with customers to find out the research you're doing or the quality you're providing them is really this is the number one thing they want?
We just talk to so many people. I would say probably about half to 3/4 of my workday is spent on the phone, on webinars, talking to stakeholders in the industry, and just finding out what their current need is. Right? What do they already understand about this industry? Where is the knowledge gap? what do you need? Like, what do you feel? Because I feel like I know, and this is a mistake we made, and I think a lot of people make.
All business owners, they think they know the customer.
We think we know the customer,
so I think
right?
like Steve Jobs is like one of the only people that are like, no, this is what you want. Yeah, you're gonna want this.
And I think I had the Steve Jobs attitude at first, right? I think so. Like I felt that I had a clear vision of what this industry needed, but there's systems and there's protocol and there's bureaucracy in place, and you have to find out who what does your customer need? Whether your customer is the health insurance companies, and every single health insurance company has its different culture. Whether you be an employer group, whether you be a laboratory, whether you be policymakers, whether you be. I mean, we work with governments. We're not just we're beginning to expand beyond the United States. What are those policymakers in need of? What are the knowledge gaps? It's about understanding your customer, no matter what the industry, of course. Understand your customer, where they are now, how you can make their life easier, right? So that's what we've really had to learn is every stakeholder that we're engaging with, how do we help them do something that's kind of against the grain, right? Because the current grain is a race to the bottom. Right? How can I get precision medicine at the lowest price? Because everyone thinks precision medicine is precise and accurate, and it's not. Right? Many of the offerings on the market now are not. So how do we make your life easier while simultaneously helping you go against the grain? Right? And that's all about understanding the customer and having multiple conversations with them, and what are the different things, the different groups and persons within their organization that you need to convince? What's the message they need to hear? How do you shift people's paradigms and frankly unlock the funding that is needed to accomplish this goal? And so that's what we've spent really the last 3 years doing.
Nice. Would you consider yourself a disruptor in the industry?
Yes.
Are people pissed at you?
Some. Very much so.
What are you disrupting, and who's upset that you guys are doing what you're doing? You don't have to say if you don't want to.
So it depends, right? So it really depends. I will say that anyone who wants to continue business as usual is either disrupted or apprehensive. Anyone who recognizes that a change needs to happen, anyone who's done the math and realized that unless we figure out a better way to deliver precision medicine, it will break the US healthcare system, is a total champion of what we're doing. Let me give you an example. So over the last 18 months, the FDA has approved in this country the first 2 gene therapies. And the first one is a gene therapy that if you have a certain type of inherited recessive, so you have to have inherited 2 copies of these bad genes. It's rare, but there's a rare inherited retinal degradation disorder. You'll go blind. And they have quite literally created a gene therapy where they will inject a new gene into your eyeball. And the eye is unique in that any DNA material you inject into your eye stays in your eye. It doesn't go throughout the rest of your body. So they can inject this new DNA material into your eye and nearly completely halt progression of this disease, right? Amazing. But there's so few people that have this disease. In order to recoup and make a profit, the company that spent a lot of time.
No, that injection is going to be.
And its injection, and so the list price, at least last I checked, was $425,000 per eyeball. So you're looking at about $850,000 to treat one patient.
Wow.
Right. Then the second gene therapy that came out is a much more complex gene therapy. It's emitted directly into your bloodstream. It's for a disease called SMA, spinal muscular atrophy, and it appears to be a miracle drug, right? And so it halts and progression. It may completely inhibit formation of this disease. The disease, you basically you can be potentially born healthy. And then within 6 months or 12 years or 30 years, depending upon the severity of the disease, die, or your muscles completely atrophy, and they basically fix the gene, right? And they inject a new gene into you, which goes into neurons and fixes this. But the treatment cost, the list price, is just over $2 million for this treatment, for one treatment.
One person?
For one person, okay. And there are countless gene therapies being developed right now. I mean,
is this CRISPR?
It is. It's related. CRISPR is in this world, right?
Okay.
The gene therapies that are being created that I'm talking about right now replace bad genes. CRISPR tech is about fixing bad genes, right? Either way, false positives matter. Okay, so let's go to this retinal degradation one, right? Let's say that a lab has sequenced this gene, and you need to have 2 hits on both copies of this gene. Lab has sequenced this gene and says, you've got a bad copy on this one and bad copy on this one. I've interpreted the sequence variants to be bad on both, okay? This therapy is not without risk. It can, some patients have experienced retinal detachment, and you can't go back on that, right? And there are even better, potentially better gene therapies or drugs being created.
Mm-hmm.
But if you break the person's eyeball in the process of administering this gene therapy, any future treatments won't work for you because your eyeball is now broken, right? Is my understanding of this. And so, none of these gene therapies are without risk. For example, in the clinical trials of the miraculous one that can, supposedly apparently cure spinal muscular atrophy, in the clinical trials, there was a baby that died from it because, and here's the thing, the gene that they're injecting into you is delivered in a viral vector, right? Your body doesn't like viruses. So anytime that a virus comes into your body, it fights it. Right. Well, this is a virus you don't want your body to fight,
mm-hmm.
right? You need it to go and deliver this DNA material where it needs to go. And so what they have to do when they treat people with this, with this particular gene therapy is they have to suppress your immune system for 30 days, right? Which is enormously risky. So the child that died in the clinical trials picked up RSV and the flu.
Oh, no.
While their immune system was suppressed and they passed away, right? Horrible. So none of these therapies are without risk to the patient. So you don't want to, cost of these therapies aside, you don't want to be treating people for these diseases if there's a chance that they never had the disease to begin with, right? And a false positive genetic test result means that, doctors think they're doing the right thing by administering these therapies. It will never work if the genetic test results were positive, were false, if the genetic test was false positive.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to make sure, and so not only have you put the patient at risk, you've also cost the healthcare system money, a boatload of money, right? And so, at JP Morgan conferences, what we're seeing is that, that there's a lot of companies seeing the lucrative nature of these gene therapies. It's anticipated, the FDA is anticipating that in the coming, within 2 or 3 to 5 years, that they'll be approving 20 or more of these type of therapies a year. And the price points that investors are talking about now are having been buoyed up by the price point of these landing somewhere between $1 million to $2 million, they're now saying that, we think the market can handle, which I don't think it can, we think the healthcare market can handle price points of $2 to $4 million on any of these given therapies.
Per person?
Per person.
Who's paying that? Like the person or is it the health company?
The health insurance company is being asked to pay this. So if you sit down and do the math like we have, and we've said, okay, what's the current false positive rate in many of these genes? Some genes, like the one that causes spinal muscular atrophy, the false positive rate is actually really, really low. But in other genes, the false positive rates, the way we've calculated it, are actually quite high, the way that this science has been done. And so if you start trying to preventively treat people for diseases that they really don't have,
right,
because you've predicted based on faulty genetic testing, it actually completely breaks the healthcare system. Like, precision medicine cannot be delivered while our diagnostics are this low quality, right? There's only so many billions of dollars that the healthcare systems have,
Yeah.
right? And like it or not, there is a cap on how much they can spend on the American public without sending the whole system bankrupt. So it's a very, a lot of the messaging that's landing with the employer groups, with the health insurance companies, is let's make sure we want these gene therapies out there. Absolutely. We want to see the coolness of what tech can do to improve lives. Absolutely. Let's just make sure that precision medicine happens. The promise of precision medicine is the right time, the right drug to the right patient, right? We don't want the wrong drug to the wrong patient at a completely irrelevant time. And so that's what we're focused on, is making sure that precision medicine is actually delivered. And so that's the message that's landing home. Now, just because you have a great message doesn't mean your customer has a way to pay you for it, right? And so a lot of it is figuring out what are the systems whether you're a payer or what you are, what are the systems you have in place to be able to engage with us so we can help you deliver on this promise. Mm-hmm. The interesting thing about precision medicine and the way that the two gene therapy drugs have been really adopted by the insurance companies is there are other companies that do what we call health economic assessments. And the way you pretty much get most things pushed through as accepted in the US and internationally by like nationalized healthcare systems is you have to demonstrate A, benefit to the patient, B, benefit to the healthcare system as far as cost, that you will save money. Most often you need to demonstrate that you will save money by adopting this new technology.
How long does that take?
Yes. Yeah.
So this is a long
yeah,
game.
it's a long road to get there. So these two precision medicine, these two gene therapies that have been approved, they've gone through the route of having that demonstrated. But again, the assumption in any of this demonstration is that the diagnostic was accurate, right? They don't put in the math that the diagnostic could have had, a 20% false positive rate or even a 50% false positive rate. And so we're out there saying, okay, let's help you do that math, recognize that this is important, that the health economics break if you accept and recognize the fact that these diagnostics are not always accurate. And so let's make sure the diagnostics are accurate. Mm-hmm. So that's what we're doing.
Cool. So it sounds like you're going to have a pretty big impact, I guess, making it more affordable for people to get the gene therapy in the future.
That's what we're hoping to do. And there's other interventions, drug interventions, surgical interventions. Some people can change their diet entirely. There are interventions you can take to reduce the effect or completely eliminate the impact of a genetic disease. And yes, we're trying to make sure that the right people have that.
So where are you, so how crazy are things going to get 5, 10, 15 years down the road? Like, how long are we going to be living here? What's life extension looking like with all these on the horizon?
Yeah. Okay. So the stuff that I'm familiar with that's being developed, that we've engaged with different companies, we have not yet engaged with a company that's looking at life extension for the typical healthy individual. Right. I think what we're looking for is what a lot of the companies that are developing this tech are looking for is life improvement. What are the things that are impacting people as they age? We're not necessarily looking to make them live longer, but how can we make
quality of life
healthy? Yeah. What's the quality of life issue? That's a major focus of a lot of adult onset disease products, genetic disease products that are being developed. And then we're also just focused on how can we prevent young onset disease and mortality at a young age. And those if you're thinking about how, because think about how scary it is to do something novel in this scientific world, right? So you have to, as you're trying to push the envelope, you're really looking to take risk, right? I'm going to inject a virus into you. That maybe, because this has happened in the past, maybe these vectors that we've injected into people in the past have caused cancer, or there's things that can go wrong, right? But there are some diseases so profoundly bad that you would rather the worst effect than this disease, Huntington's disease, for example, right? Let's say that whatever trials, whatever treatments that we are experimenting with now give you, cure you, but give you cancer 10 years down the line. Well, if your life expectancy and quality of life was, if your life expectancy was shorter than 10 years and your quality of life was so much worse than cancer, then we'll take the risk. And so what's happening now, what we see companies doing, is targeting therapies to push this envelope at things where the disease is far worse than almost every negative outcome, with the exception of death, rapid death, every negative outcome that could happen. So what we're going to see is that these very profound diseases are going to be treated first, as we're getting used to what is the impact of genetic therapy, what is the impact of CRISPR, what are the consequences. Nothing is consequence-free, right? There's no treatment on this planet that doesn't have a consequence. So it's really on anything. So it's really a balance of we need to understand these consequences. Then potentially, if we can reduce the consequences, sky's the limit, right? If as long as we can identify the true causality of a disease, which is not as easy as people think, right? You watch popular television shows, and whenever they have your scientists, and it's like your crime shows I've seen where they like scrape a hair and they put it in a box, and 5 minutes later there's a DNA molecule spinning on the screen. That's not how this works, right? Like nothing is that fast, is that easy. It is that easy to interpret. Every step of the way, there's complex steps that can have accuracies and inaccuracies. And so a lot of while we're developing the technologies to fix genetic disease, which is very exciting and I'm all for, what we're actually lagging behind is the technology to correctly interpret the DNA sequence. So the technology to sequence DNA is fabulous, right? It's getting better every day. It's already amazing. And now we're seeing massive leaps forward in the ability to treat genetic disease. CRISPR techs being explored, these gene therapies. What's lacking in the middle is the bit that we are profoundly interested in helping improve, which is the interpretation, making sure that we interpreted your DNA sequence correctly.
So is that why? So I have the 23andMe app, and every month or 2 months or 3 months, I'll get new data saying, "Hey, I'm clear on this disease or this genetic mutation or whatever."
Yeah,
is that kind of the improvement of that area?
Yeah, the industry is moving forward and making discovery, and so. Part of the 23andMe product is that they'll continue to give you those updates. And the exchange for that is they're hoping that you will engage in the surveys. I don't know if you do.
I don't, but I will now.
Part of that, they're trying to, because you only paid once for that product, right?
Yeah.
But they're trying to continue to give you value in hopes that you will continue to engage in the survey, because humanity is the greatest experiment out there, right? So they have aspects of your DNA code. If you've consented to doing research, then, which the majority of people that engage with 23andMe have, every time they send you a survey, whatever they're asking, sometimes they're just fun. Do you like cilantro? Sometimes they're legitimate, like do you?
I hate cilantro.
Sometimes they're legitimate, like does you and your family respond well to this type of medication? Do you have this type of disease in your family? That data is going into a data set and being matched to yours and many hundreds of thousands of other people's DNA, and they're making discovery. And then that discovery can lead to therapeutic development.
I see.
And so when you engage, there's a lot of people concerned about privacy, and is it right for these companies to be using your DNA?
If I get in trouble with the law, can they track me down? DNA
Yeah,
sample, right?
so there's that, and that that's a whole discussion that's happening. These companies are. To my understanding, the criminals that have been caught and put behind bars, the DNA that they used to do that, the family members they found, they were volunteer. So there are databases out there. Whereas if you've had your DNA sequenced or what we call genotyped by some company, you can download that raw data and you actively put it into this public data set. You're like, yeah, I want to find out if my relatives are criminals. Here you go. Some people might find that fun, right? So to my knowledge, anytime that's happened, it has happened because people have volunteered their data.
I see.
To my knowledge, the major companies that are collecting your DNA, like 23andMe and others like it, are actively protecting the privacy of their customers' data. and saying, okay, if you want your data used in that way, you download it and you put it somewhere else, but we're not playing that game. So in terms of, so there's that. But if you have consented for these companies to use your data for basic research, then you are, actually helping therapies be created. And I find it interesting. I find it interesting that people are like, my data privacy, I don't want you selling my data. Well, you know what happens when that data gets sold? Drugs get made. And that drug might save your life, right? So
sell your data, folks.
Well, you do what's right for you. Everyone needs to do what's right for you. But what I'm telling you is that precision medicine cannot be realized unless we have large data sets and people cooperating with the for-profit companies, right? And so, there's a lot of vilification of capitalism, of this happening, and I'm like, well, they're making drugs that are going to save us all. So, and I run a nonprofit, and I'm telling you, no one's showering us with money to make these drugs, right? so if it's capitalism that makes it happen, then let's help them make that happen.
Yeah. So as we're wrapping this up, how are you moving forward with this nonprofit in the next 1, 2, 3 years? What's the forecast looking like for you?
Yeah.
And how do you how do you scale that you're not a for-profit company? So does it make it difficult to just ramp it up?
It does make it difficult. We have to bootstrap, so it slows it down. So we would love to find a foundation who appreciated what we were doing and is like, here is a donation of $1 million or $2 million. We'd love to find that. We haven't found that, but we're determined people, and we're bootstrapping our way. So by bootstrapping, and what I mean is that, you ask about scale. We find, health insurance companies, laboratories. Our biggest contract last year was with a major pharmaceutical company that was collecting data and wanted to make sure it was highly accurate. And so they engaged us to ensure the integrity of those data sets. So this is how we bootstrap our way, is that we find people who have some type of contract, some type of thing they need done, where they recognize that we're the people to do it for them. So as Elevate Genetics goes bigger, we will more rapidly be able to do more. We're a nonprofit, so any profit that we make in any of our contracts and any of the work that we do, we funnel back into the stuff that we can't see profitable pathways to. So basic projects. For example, we have a project called Project Heritage, which is in collaboration with another nonprofit called Special Angels Adoption. And this is, we recognize that we actually cause this industry consternation, right? What we're saying is that genetic testing isn't black and white. There's a lot of gray area. Not all genetic tests give you an absolute answer. Sometimes it's just a risk. Sometimes it's just, for example, in fetal testing, a mother might be told, if she's being told the truth about the fetal genetic test, they might be told, you have a 70% chance of this baby having a certain type of genetic syndrome. They're not going to live more than a few hours past birth. And what does that mother do? Does she terminate? Does she carry the baby to term? What we're injecting is we're trying to educate people that these genetic tests are all not as accurate as perhaps the clinician has thought they were. So now the mother may be told, if we succeed, now the mother's being told there's a 70% chance that your baby, or a 90% chance that your baby is going to have one of these horrific diseases. Now the mother's in even a worse position because it's like there's all these gray areas. So what we have is a program right now that in no way makes us any profit, but is important to us. It's called Project Heritage. And we funnel money from the other projects we have to be able to fund this. We do have a little bit of funding from a group called Antioch Foundation to do a pilot with this in 2020. So what we do is we give them another option. We say, if you choose, to carry your baby to term, given this uncertainty of the genetic result, if you choose to carry your baby to term and they're born with this disability, and then you recognize at that point, or you decide at that point, I can't raise a child with that disability. We'll find that child, Special Angels Adoption will find that child a home.
That's nice. Yeah.
Right. If the child's born, has the disability, and you decide, actually, I can do this, Special Angels Adoption actually pairs you while you're pregnant with a peer family that is actually raising a child with that same disability.
See lessons learned.
Lessons learned. Can you do this? How hard was it really? And then if your child is born perfectly healthy, you didn't terminate and the baby is born perfectly healthy,
right.
You may choose to keep, like, yeah, I can totally do that, right? So what we're doing is we're giving more options to women. And that's called Project Heritage, because we recognize that if we succeed in our mission, we are injecting uncertainty into the user experience in genetics. And so we need to create these valves, these systems for people to handle the gray areas. And this is one of those areas where we're working on that, is Project Heritage. So what we do is we scale, we find contracts, we find people who will pay us to do certain things. The profit margins we realize through that, we then reapply to these projects that don't make any money, but help a lot of people. So that's why we're a nonprofit. That's why we're dedicated to staying a nonprofit. You could never do that in a for-profit company.
Yeah, no, that's an awesome cause. Yeah, no, that's really cool. I really appreciate you doing this. I learned a ton, and it sounds like you have a really good thing going here.
Thank you.
So if the people want to get a hold of you, if you have a final message for them as well, let them know how they can contact you.
Yep. Our website is www.genomicinterpretation.org. We do accept donations, as small or as large as you wish. We would love foundation support in our mission, and we're here to save lives. That's it.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate it. Do you have any social media that can reach you out on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn?
Yeah, so probably Twitter is the thing that we occasionally use right now. We are trying to get better at social media, but you can follow me at Dr. So Dr. Dr.J_Eggington. Often when I go and give presentations at conferences, somebody tweets something, and you can kind of see how the community and how doctors are responding to our message.
Awesome. Well, cool. That was awesome again. And everybody, let me know what you think. Leave some comments below, and see you in the next one. Later.